of where you sell to. So it's a multiple choice situation in relation for kind of more interaction. And different countries have not only different processes, but also different regulations, not for us.
Different countries have different ways of doing things. Also, I can tell you as it compares to programming. You write a program, and then it's not quite right, and you go and you fix it, and then somebody else wants another option, you go put that in, and then somebody else. And you get this sort of accretion of changes and fixes, and programs get really complicated after a while. So much so that at some point you have to scrap them and you write them again in a clean way. And that's sort of what happens with bureaucracy, bureaucratic procedures, is they get changed, and they never get smaller. They always, we say bureaucracy is sticky upwards. It gets more and messier and messier. But once it's there, it's a program you can sort of take out, write another one, and plug it in. That seems to be a lot harder with procedures. But maybe the comparison has merits and can at least occur. Next. Now, this is where the relevance to you guys should become more apparent. What this is saying is that most of this problem, at least, is measured in terms of delays. And delays are a close measure of cost. A great deal of the problem is not due to the hardware involved in the transport. It's due to the documents. It's due to the delays in the documentation.
So when I found this chart, it made me really surprised. Usually we think the transaction cost is because of the physical infrastructure. You see, because of that problem. And when I look at this chart, the main thing is about the documentation, about the requirement it will add to the procedure to increase the transaction, rather than the physical requirement like for facility and so on. It just accounts small percentage in this transaction cost.
Next. This is a number that attracts my attention. Actually, I had made a separate calculation using a little bit of different estimates, and I ended up with the same number. So, world trade. The level of world trade, the total level of world trade is what?
It's now is
3 trillion?
No, it's now is 11 trillion.
11 trillion, right.
11 trillion.
Overhead costs are like 300 billion. So the transaction costs, actually between developed countries, transaction costs have gotten quite streamlined. So between the United States and Europe, they're down to like 1 or 2%. North-south trades, much higher. That also includes, by the way, the cost of corruption. So the estimated savings, this is not my calculation, but Bob Crowhurst, estimated savings of information technology for trade, for international trade, 100 billion, and another 75 billion for improving procedures. So this is, in terms of marketing your final projects, you know what to make this thing.
I mean, I do understand this problem because I work in the shipping industry, and we're trying to solve actually the same problem, like that there's too much difference.
Comment a little bit on we.
Well, DHL. And the thing is, I mean, there's so many documents, DOL, CN notification, there's airway laws, and everything is different. But if it would be so easy to standardize it, I mean, it's really hard to standardize things. And I mean, I think the best example for standardization and why it's like not that easy is like why is the U.S. not converting to the metric system? It's just not. I mean, people are stubborn in a way, and I think there's just things that are not gonna change. And I think,
That's just one
yeah, the
aspect.
world would be like so
Yeah,
much
change that.
easier if everything could be standardized, but it's not gonna happen.
Well, EDI has, I mean, there's one comment that was actually in the footnote about standardizing the physical code. And the fellow that had done it had spent like, I forget the number, it was like 25 months involved in something as simple as the purchase order. And you start off and there's like 87 different variations that you have to somehow work. A purchase order is one of the simple documents. And then you've got another 80 other documents to standardize. And these efforts, the EDI part, as she said, is not the technology that's a big deal. The EDI technology is actually fairly simple. It's the standardization of the concepts, getting those. And if you look at an EDI document, there's several levels of options. And there's sort of the required fields, then there's the semi-required fields, and then there's the optional fields. And there might be 300 optional fields that you and your partner may choose, but it's not necessarily going to be the case with another partner. All you can count on is those really required fields which are standard. And that's just the documents. What we're talking about is the procedures. Next. Now, the other side of it, and the trade facilitation people have been making progress. EDI has made some important successes, and the people that are working on procedures have got some important successes, especially in the electronification of procedures. But since that famous date in 2001, now the world is greatly concerned about another side of things, and that's the security aspects. There has not yet been a major to my knowledge, there has not yet been a major terrorism incident based on containers. But it's like a problem waiting to happen.
Right. Actually, there are some problem. I remember in Australia also, they use the container to carry people. Illegal immigrants.
That's been done quite a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And often they die. And sometimes they die because of diseases or something like that. I'll ask who, anybody else in the room, there's one area of the world that's considered to be the most likely place for terrorism incidents of international trade. The bottleneck. Close. It's someplace like that, but it's not physically close. It's the other side of the world.
Rotterdam. Rotterdam.
Notre Dame. Terrible.
I'm asking who because he would be the most likely to know. Do you know what it is?
Rotterdam, which is in Asia, right?
Yeah, it's in Asia.
Right.
It's the Straits of Malacca.
Yeah.
And I've only heard this because apparently a great deal of oil shipment goes through this fairly narrow passage. And if they could sink one superliner there, world oil would be, like half of the oil movement of the world would be paralyzed. Something like that. That's security. Now, I didn't have time to bulletize these slides. Security, the big deal here is, so the Coast Guard and Customs are getting together within the Department of Homeland Security, and they're developing these new codes, International Ship and Port Facility Security Code. There's new regulations coming down. And I'm going to comment a bit on this Container Security Initiative. And then recently, last year, there was a deal about buying out, Dubai was going to buy out P&O to control ports in the United States, and that brought security into the public eye. Normally, this sort of goes on in the background. People don't think much about it. But this huge amounts of money involved there. Next. So there's a new act called the Safe Port Act, the security and accountability for every port. This is